Welcome back, everyone. I'm JTXRP, and today we're going to actually talk to Jon here from Jon McBee from XDC about Agile and the crypto space. And so it's actually a cross section for me of two subjects that I'm extremely passionate about. And you may not understand the Agile space as much, but it may be interesting to you to hear this perspective and how it affects maybe some of the projects that are being developed by some of your favorite projects. So, and if you are a developer and you're interested in the Agile space, then maybe this will be a double win for you. But for those who are not familiar, I just want to go over a quick overview of what Agile is, where it came from, so that you have some context coming into this conversation with Jon and myself. So Agile is kind of an umbrella term to host a couple of these different frameworks. And this is things that kind of affect how we work, how we do things, so that we can bring value to our customer faster. And so you may hear words like Scrum, XP, Kanban, Lean, and some of these others that kind of fit under this Agile umbrella. And they all kind of came from this Agile manifesto that we'll get into here soon. But I wanted to make sure that you knew a little bit about where, again, what it all is. So you might hear two terms specifically as we're talking: waterfall, which is, and this is all about software development right now in the context of which we're talking about, is where you gather a lot of requirements, you maybe do some design, you do the development, and you do the delivery and the maintenance, but these are all done within one large project and are released maybe in a time of a year, 2 years, very long projects, to where at the very end of those 2 years, that's when the customer receives the value and you get the feedback from the market of whether or not you actually created the right thing and are actually, producing something that your customers want. Versus Agile, where you're gathering requirements, you're doing the design, maintenance, and you're doing the development, and you're delivering it to your customer, and you're getting that feedback. And this all may happen from 2 weeks to a month, or maybe sometimes even less. So you're getting that feedback quickly. You're making the right thing because the market is telling you, and your customers are telling you that you're making the right thing, and they're purchasing it or they're not purchasing it. And so you get that feedback quicker, so you can do better in your software development. So maybe there's something wrong in your design. Maybe your stability is not quite there, and you need some maintenance. But again, we're able to get that feedback quicker. So a little bit about where Agile came from. So Agile came from I don't know the exact date, way back in the day. You can go to the agilemanifesto.org and read more about the exact, the exact date and the story behind it. But essentially, some very smart people got together and they created what's called the Agile Manifesto, which is where a lot of these frameworks and different things came from. And it says, we are uncovering better ways of developing software by doing it and helping others do it. Through this work, we have come to value individuals and interactions over processes and tools, working software over comprehensive documentation, customer collaboration over contract negotiation, and responding to change over following a plan, which is, where that waterfall and Agile, background came from. So that is, while there is value on the items on the right, we value the items on the left more. And so this is how people that are using Agile practices are able to respond. And so with that being said, I just want to kind of leave it here for a bit and then welcome Jon into the conversation. Jon works at XDC. Thank you so much for joining us today, Jon. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Thank you very much for having me, James. I appreciate it.
Yes, thank you so much. So Jon, while I do cover mostly XRPL projects, I was in a room with Quincy Jones, who I think is also a developer at XDC.
Yep.
And he was very gracious to have me come up. And I met Jon through talking a little bit about asking Quincy about Agile and software development on the and the crypto side of things, which has always interested me, because the crypto space has to be extremely agile, I feel like, in order to keep up. Like, this is a market that is changing, if not daily, hourly, and it is so hard to keep up with all these different requirements and tools. But just full transparency, guys, I do own many different coins and tokens besides XRP and XRPL projects. I'm extremely excited about the entire crypto space. And while I may seem like I'm a maximalist, I guess you could say, in XRP, like I'm very interested in other tokens and how they interact with each other in these protocols a lot more. Jon, tell us a little bit about your position and your experience with Agile, or actually, let's start with you and your role in XDC first. Let's start there.
Sure thing. So I work for the XDC Foundation, and so just a little bit of, I guess, semantics. There's the XDC network, which is the layer one blockchain, and the XDC Foundation. What we do is we curate and maintain the blockchain. And so our goal is to build tools that make it easier for people to come build on the XDC network. Our goal is to support Xinfin, which is a different entity than the foundation. Cynefin is a company focused on global trade finance. The foundation tries to build tooling to enable people to come and build and be successful on the network. And our main goal is to get more transaction volume. The higher transaction volume we can generate on the network, the easier it is for Cynefin to be successful with global trade finance. And so what I do day to day is I run projects. My job title is smart contract architect. It'll be changing soon. What I do day to day is not write smart contracts. I typically am a product owner from the foundation side. And so we'll have an idea for a new product. I will work to put together a proposal for what I think we should build. We bring it to the DAO, the foundation's a DAO, and we vote on it. If we decide that this project or product will add value to the network, I'll go find an integration team. We have a couple all around the world that we work with, and have them actually quote it for me. And we'll get the quotes back and pick the one we want to work with, and then we'll just run sprints to execute on that vision. And so typically they can last anywhere from a full year or more of effort, like our NFT marketplace that's about to come out, or it can last a couple of months, like Origin, which we just released. So it can really spread the gamut. It's always a waterfall approach. Working to get Agile into different parts of our business. We just released a website. And so we really pushed from a process point of view to even develop the website in an Agile manner, where we had the copyright people and the creative people on a cross-functional team. And we had somebody just saying, okay, the goal for this sprint is to do this, this, and this, and we go do it. And so from my point of view, a little more context about me, I guess. So I've been a software developer since around 2005. I've been writing software mainly for industrial automation, so entirely different tool set than we use for crypto. But I'm, worked my way up, done a whole bunch of software. I started using Agile development, really Scrum, in around 2013. Did software for a couple companies, went to a software consultancy firm, did a couple big projects without Scrum, and consulting without Scrum is really hard because you're either lying to yourself and underbidding to get the project, or you're being truthful and you're going to end up having a bid higher than your competitors, and the customer doesn't want to see that. And so you have to find the right customer who understands the value of open communication and honesty for Scrum to work, in my opinion. Like, they have to be willing to be working with you throughout the whole development process. They can't just say, here's my requirements, and walk away for a month or more and come back and expect it to work. It's a mismatch on expectations, and it's destined to fail. I created my own software company. So after consulting for a while, I realized I might as well just do it for myself, and built a team of 7 people, still focused on industrial automation. And I managed that company for about 5 years. Everything that we did was Agile, from how we wrote our software to how we ran our projects, how we communicated with our partners. Everything was Agile, and it works very nicely, but you have to have the right people playing the right game on both sides, customer and development team. And I got into cryptocurrency in 2017, XRP, right? I was a big XRP guy for the longest time, and I still own XRP, right? So I guess full disclosure, I own XRP, XDC, a few others. So I got into XRP in 2017. I had a really fun time with that bull run, like it was
yeah.
And then I got into XDC in 2019. There's kind of a little period of time there where XRP community members were exploring XDC pretty heavily, and I kind of got sucked into XDC in that time frame. turned out to be the best time frame. Like July of 2019 was the all-time low, and just happened to stumble into the project then. And so I was able to get into XDC early, and I just kind of sat there, did my day job until end of 2019, early 2020. I got to know the XDC community better. Eventually got to know people who formed the foundation better, and they invited me to come join them. So I left my own company, right? I was running my own company, and I sold my equity to my partners and jumped into XDC Foundation full time. And I've been
Wow.
doing that since middle of last year, 2021. So that's kind of how I got to where I am, and kind of what I do day to day, and why Agile matters to me.
Gotcha. So you've kind of lived and breathed that waterfall side of
Yep.
things and then try to do your own, like you understood why it worked or why Agile or Scrum, which is a one of those frameworks within Agile, to really help your customers. And so you've kind of been worked through all those dynamics and now you're doing this product ownership job for XDC, right?
Exactly.
So, for those who are not familiar, product ownership, the product owner is kind of the value optimizer. He's the person that the development team looks to for understanding the product, to make to communicate the requirements, to deal with. He's supposed to be the one person that communicates with all the stakeholders to be able to understand the product, understand the market, and then make sure that that each sprint that the development team is working on the right thing, and so that by the end of the sprint, whether that's 2 weeks or 4 weeks, and that they have a done absolutely market ready portion of the product to be able to deliver to you guys. And
Mhm.
so really appreciate Jon. That's a really hard job. There's lots of different people's opinions. You have to learn to say no a lot. And
Yep.
so can I guess tell us about those experiences. And I mean, you have a DAO, which is essentially a lot of stakeholders in one place. And let's talk about that a little bit. Like usually you have like maybe some vice presidents,
Mhm.
some different internal stakeholders if you're making a product internally, or you have your customers that you're trying to get eyes on. But how does a DAO change that dynamic whenever you're trying to gain that product knowledge and understanding of the market? Like, tell us a little bit about that dynamic and maybe how it changed for you.
Yep. So I like to think of myself as an abstraction layer between the DAO and the product, right? So sometimes it's easy. So Xinfin, before the foundation existed, had a couple of products on their website, one of which was my contract. And the idea behind my contract was that it was supposed to be a no code, low code environment to go and mint and deploy tokens.
Gotcha.
It never really functioned though, right? It was up there for years. It's still up there right now. And depending on when you go to use it, if you were lucky, you might be able to get a smart contract deployed, and it never functioned right. That's actually what got me into the foundation. Was I contacted the community members who I knew were prominent, and I said, look, we need to fix this.
Hmm.
um, so like from the point of view of origin, it was very simple, because once I was in the foundation, I basically made a proposal, and I said, look, my contract doesn't function, we should fix it, and we should do it from scratch, right? Because do we bring code over and try to fix it, or do we just blue sky it? Let's create
Hmm.
exactly what we want that does what we need. And so I had to make that argument to the DAO, because
Hmm.
from the DAO's point of view, they want to make sure that we're optimizing value per dollar. And so it's hard for people who don't write software every day to understand that taking a legacy code base that never really worked right and
Yeah.
getting a different development team to come and try to make it work the way you want it to, it's not as easy as it sounds.
No.
So I had to make that case to the DAO and get buy-in, that the start from scratch approach is right. And even then, I had to make another case that we should focus on an MVP, right? So there are all these features that my contract was supposed to be able to have implemented. Why don't we just try to duplicate all those features on the first go? I had to make the case for why it's important to start small, right?
Yeah,
Build the
exactly.
foundation for the code base and let it do one thing really well. If it does that one thing really well, people are going to use the tool, and now we have an audience that can help us grow new features. They can tell us what they want, and we'll build it for them. So my job is finding the value proposition and then pitching that to the DAO. Um, it's not, I mean, it's not that hard because they trust my input, my feedback. And so I'm able to show that value proposition. But man, software is weird, right? People don't understand, at least from my point of view, it's hard to find people that do understand. Software kind of has two values, right? Robert Martin talks about this, and I always loved it. The primary value of software is that it's soft and flexible and can change, right? And that has to influence both how you write the code itself on a low level, but also how you manage the creation of the code, how you execute the project. And the secondary value is that it solves the customer's problem. People don't see that. People think the primary value of software is that it does what the customer wants. The problem with that is the customer hardly ever knows what they want, right? They usually don't have a clear picture of what they want until they start to see what can be done.
Yeah.
And then what can be done influences what they want, and it changes. So that's why Agile is necessary, because it has change built in, adaptation to change. It's part of the process instead of being an external pressure on the process, right? So the four things, actually, if you go back real quick to the Agile Manifesto.
Sure, thanks. Yeah.
Those four things there, responding to change, hugely important. But what I see is that the people who are not involved in the development process, maybe they're just involved with funding or deciding if it should happen or not, they tend to value the things on the right a lot and don't even consider the things on the left, right? They don't think of those as being integral to the software development process. And so as product owner, I have to be a champion for those four things on the left and really talk about why they add more value than the four things on the right. Right. The four things on the right are how people expect software to go. But if you lean into that expectation, I can almost guarantee you it's not going to go well. The bigger the project, the harder it is to be successful. If you focus on delivering, functioning increments, and after each increment, you have a built-in process for injecting change or feedback from the customer.
Yeah.
There's so much easier to be successful. You always have a picture of where you are and where you're going can change. And you always know how much money you've spent, right? The big waterfall project. I've been parts of big waterfall projects. So like, I think the biggest one I've ever been a part of was a multi-year effort to build a battery management test system where you could walk up on a production line and you could insert one of 120 batteries. And there was like resource sharing with regard to how batteries were charged and discharged. And there was a processor with a database. And it was a very complicated project and it worked, but it wasn't agile. And that was actually the project that made me realize there's got to be a better way. It's almost impossible to know up front how much one of those things is going to cost the customer. And so the easiest way to give the customer what they need is to not even try to tell them how much it's going to cost up front. You can give them a ballpark, but basically what we do is we sell them, a couple sprints at a time. So maybe 3 or 4 sprints out of a bucket, then we reevaluate and we do 3 or 4 more sprints out of a bucket. Now I'm just kind of rambling.
No,
did I answer your question?
Yeah, no, I think that's great. I'd love to hear about your experiences, and that's one of the things that we want to hear. I think it's valuable to the viewers to hear the understanding of like why they're these different projects in the crypto space, especially because maybe you're just if you're watching this, maybe you are just a part-time investor, maybe you just got into crypto, or maybe you've been in the space 4 years, and maybe some of this is you've never peeled back behind the curtain of some of these larger crypto projects and to understand maybe what's going on in the trying to create some of these different protocols and these features that you're wanting so badly. And so I think this is extremely vital to hear and from your perspective. So I greatly appreciate that. I did want to go to the Cynefin framework real quick and just kind of explain a little bit more about what you're talking about. So again, when we're approaching these projects, this is a framework that's often kind of used to depict the different areas that we try to problem solve. So clear, where things are very understood, you can create like an assembly line and just pop out things. And that's kind of how people tend to think about even software sometimes. And that's just not the case. You can't just, pump out features left and right. And then there's complicated, there may be a winding path, but the problem is fairly knowable still, but it might take an expert to really get you from one point to the end faster. And then complex is where you don't really know the exact nature of the problem. It's complex. You have to experiment to get to the place that you want to get to, and even then you may be wrong sometimes. And then chaotic is where, you're like, your tear's on fire, you're just trying to put the fire out. And so I'm sure many of you are probably familiar with that state in some form of fashion. And if you're confused, you have no idea which one you're in. And so, but between this complex state and complicated is usually where I've heard many people say software development lies. And so, as a Scrum Master myself, which is someone who helps to facilitate teams and build strong teams on these frameworks, this is kind of where, if you're not looking at a software project, it's usually somewhere either towards the complex side or on that ladder, somewhere in between. And so, it's not easy to get you these features when especially getting one person like that dynamic that you said, where there is a what do you call it, the gap between what a person knows that they want or thinks that they want and then what's actually able to give to them, and then they kind of base they come to a different judgment, and then you're able to incorporate that feedback. But that's just one person. Then you have a product that's supposed to help millions of people possibly, and the general what do you say, the general, not general public, but I'm losing the word, the market in general for whatever that product is. So yeah, I just wanted to share that real quick so people understand that, like, people may know software development is not easy. For some people it may be Egyptian or Greek to them, but trying to describe the nature of the complexity of the projects you deal with is kind of hard sometimes. So I just want to break this down and share the Cynefin framework. It's really been a great visual for me and helped me be able to explain that. So I'll go back to the manifesto though. So you tell us a little bit about product ownership. Let's talk a little bit about what framework you're using. Are you using Scrum in your current context? And for those who are not familiar with Scrum, I'll just share the Scrum framework. And this is, you can go and you can just Google or Agile Games with James. I have a audio book where you can listen to this if you're interested, but tell us if you're using this framework or another one in XDC. And if you could just go into a little bit about maybe your team size and your backlog and so forth. So
yeah. We are using Scrum on a couple projects across multiple development teams. One thing that was hard for me to get my head around, coming from running my own small company that was focused on running Scrum, is that now my development team is usually spread across multiple countries, and the communication becomes more difficult because of time zones, or even just because of culture. I find that different cultures will communicate differently with regard to deliverables. Like, yes, I can get that done, or sometimes I can say, this is an interesting idea, but I have to be explicit. I don't want you to do this right now. This can be in the product backlog, but maybe not the sprint backlog. So really being explicit and using this framework to drive where things fall. So yeah, we do use Scrum, ranging on team sizes of myself, one Scrum Master, one developer for small stuff. Myself, a Scrum Master. So like right now I'm working on a project, an account explorer, similar to the rich list that Wind has for XRP.
okay.
Making one of those for XDC because it's a cool idea. The community loves it, and it gives people feedback on kind of where they fall on the account holders. So I'm working on that project right now. We're on the third sprint of 3 for the first real deliverable that's going to be public facing. And the product owner is me, Scrum Masters in Canada, and the development team, which is about 4 people, made of a Solidity person, front end, and maybe 2 back end, are in Poland. And so it's hard to get meetings together with that many time zones in play.
Yeah.
But it still works fine. And so the way that we function is we'll get together and we do it through a proposal. The proposal gets turned into a product backlog, but the proposal allows me to bring some written words down, write some words down, bring it to the DAO and show the DAO what I want to do across, say, 3 sprints. And so I don't know why, but 3 sprints seems to be about right. And I think it might be because of where it falls monetarily, unless where it falls on the time frame side. Gotcha. But I can go and say, across these next 6 weeks, we're going to run 3 sprints, and our goal is to implement these features, and it's going to cost this much money. And I'll present that to the DAO, get feedback, incorporate feedback, and eventually we land on something we like. secure funding, and then we'll bring it over and we'll build up the product backlog based on the proposal. And I'll work with the Scrum Master and talk about how we want to sort things. He'll work with the development team. We'll get a backlog for that first sprint, and they kind of go and do it. There are daily stand-up meetings. I don't take part in every one of those. The Scrum Master and the development team are always there. I typically will meet with them once or twice a week. So tends to be once on Monday, Tuesday, once Thursday, Friday, just where are you now and where did you get to throughout the week. After the sprints, we have a meeting where we'll do demos. They'll show me working code. Then I can take those demos and show them to the DAO. So I'm the one that's actually showing the working code to the DAO itself. So I'm kind of abstracting away all of the development from the DAO itself. We do a retrospective, decide if things need to be changed. So what worked well, what didn't work well, how can we make the process better? Then we go for the next sprint. The tricky parts tend to be the time between sprints. And the dev team side obviously doesn't want any gap because they want to keep that work flowing. They want to make sure that we can continue to have access to the right members of the dev team for whatever's going to be coming up in the pipeline. But because of how we act as a DAO, I can't just secure an open bucket of funding. I have to keep going back and saying, okay, we want this money for this. So it's all very explicit and trackable from the DAO's point of view.
Gotcha.
And that's kind of the weak point is after that 3-week or 3-sprint cycle, there's a gap where I need to go and show the value that we delivered, put another proposal together for upcoming value, and then secure funding for it. And so that's the main pain point that I see. But actually living in the sprint cycle is great because it allows us to change if we need to change in between sprints, which we typically do. Want to inject something. Either I had an idea that I like that I want to add to the backlog. Right?
Yep. That never happens to product owners. It never happens.
Exactly right. So it works fantastically well for us. So well that, like I mentioned, we're starting to bring it into just business processes within the foundation.
Gotcha. So yeah, you mentioned some things there. And so for people that are not familiar, usually the sprint review is a time where the developers have created what's called the increment, which is supposed to be a fully functional, ideally vertical slice of software that's something you as a customer can use. And so then you have a sprint review where sometimes it turns into just a demo. It's not the best practice. The idea is that you're supposed to get that feedback in that sprint review with the stakeholders, with the product owner to get that feedback and then move again iteratively throughout this what this whole thing is a sprint, by the way. So this whole thing may be 2 weeks long. These are different events and artifacts, and of course the team inside the framework. But you're saying that it seems like at the end of like 3 different sprints, so that would be like if it's a sprint is 2 weeks, then that's 6 weeks that you're not getting that feedback until the 6 weeks. Is that what I'm hearing? Or
no, so at the end of each sprint, we do that sprint review.
Oh, okay, cool.
We have a retrospective. But what I'm saying, the gap is a funding gap. And so at the end of the 3 sprints, our funding that we had allocated from the foundation is up, right? It's empty. So I have to go back to the foundation and say, this is kind of overall what we accomplished in those 3 sprints. And this is what we would like to do with 3 more sprints if we want to do 3 more sprints. And so I have to kind of start the big picture over every 3 sprints or so.
Gotcha, man. Well, I mean, persistent teams is always a good thing if you can have it, but that sounds like, you're working within your context. Of course, you can only be as agile as your context allows you to be. And so of course you can always work it sounds like you're doing that, working to help make sure that is more and that agility is or Scrum specifically is being used to help the entire XDC organization, which is really cool to hear, by the way. I don't know of any, you're the first I've heard, and maybe if you want to come on the show, if you're watching this and you want to talk about your context between Agile and crypto, would love to hear more about how your context is helping. So hit me down in the comments below if you have that, or if you have questions. I'm sure me or Jon would be happy to respond when this video's up. But Yeah, this is, I mean, but let's talk about crypto for a second because we've talked a little about agile, we've talked a little about product ownership. Now let's talk a little bit about crypto and how how the crypto space might be different
Mhm.
from all we've really heard about is the DAO. Is there anything else that um like you obviously we're all interested in price as crypto investors, and none of this is financial advice by the way, but we're all interested in how price is affected, and we usually know, or at least I've observed that whenever something comes out that brings utility to a to one of these protocols and a cryptocurrency, that that's when obviously price can be affected. Do you find price to be, as a product owner, a real driving factor in your decisions and how you think about things and trying to bring that value to the customers? Or how does this, having this really huge and very transparent KPI, I think that's right, KPI, like key performance indicator, yeah, okay, that to the market, like how does that drive your decision making? Let's talk about that too.
Yeah, so it has a couple of different pressures, right? The most obvious one is that we fund projects with XDC, right? So the foundation has a treasury of XDC.
Okay.
And our task as a foundation is to grow that ecosystem around the network. And the way we do that is we do what we've been talking about, where we'll think of tools that we could build to make it easier for other people to build. So Origin is an example. Um, and we want to fund the creation of that tool with XDC. And based on the price of XDC, the dollar amount in our treasury changes, right? And that's
Hmm.
weird.
Yeah.
Cryptocurrency is so volatile that day to day, our treasury fluctuates and what it's worth in dollars. And when the price is low, it's harder to execute on every idea. We have to make sure that we're focused on the most value add opportunities. Um, like we had a little run up to 20 cents earlier. I think it was June or July of last year, and that was nice. Decisions all become easier at higher prices.
Yeah, right.
But that said, we have to work within the constraints that we have, and that is definitely one of the constraints is the price of the token. So when the foundation is building these tools, we don't focus on doing what we do to drive the price of XDC up, right? We're decoupled from the price of XDC with regard to our decisions are focused on making it easy for other people to build.
Hmm.
That's really how we make our decisions, not on what could we do to drive the price up. Um, Now that said, we don't just build tools, we also work on integrations with projects, with exchanges, with wallets. And overall, the rising tides lifts all boats, right? And so the
Yeah.
more that we do building out our ecosystem, it's going to make it easier for people to come and be successful on the network or come and speculate on the price, and they can now buy it when they couldn't buy it before. And so everything is going to influence price, whether we focus on that or not. Um,
Gotcha.
so I think I mentioned way back at the start, but what we're doing is all the decisions that we make are made to raise transactional volume on the network so that trade finance applications run through Xinfin can function more efficiently. So back in September of last year, 2021, there was a big announcement for us where Trade Tech, a non-bank originator focused on trade finance, worked with Xinfin to create the first trade asset backed NFT. We made a really cool platform where Trade Tech could offer to their customers the ability to come and invest in these trade finance assets that are typically really tough to invest in because of all the different banks involved. It's hard to say, I want to own. Yeah. So it's hard for investors to invest in these trade finance assets. And so bringing blockchain into that simplifies dramatically how people can bring trade finance assets into their portfolio. To the point where someday I believe XDC holders are going to be able to fund trade finance by using their XDC to back, say, a stable coin. And that stable coin is going to be the asset that actually gets used to buy and sell these trade finance tokenized assets. But what I was saying is all this becomes more efficient as the price of XDC goes up and the transactional volume goes up. And so that's kind of why we do what we do, is to drive the transactional volume up so trade finance can function better.
Gotcha. No, it makes I think that's a factor that is extremely overlooked. As you know, people sometimes might think, oh, well, my project isn't doing so well. Why aren't the teams like uh what's the word? Working hard to change, whatever they think the price is at the time. And what they don't may not understand is like the price affects you guys as well. And that limits your options to be able to spin up another team to add maybe that great collaboration you were planning on doing, because you guys don't work for free. you
Mhm.
guys you guys are human beings with lives and families that you have to support, and that limits your options greatly. So I think that is a huge factor that you mentioned. And but I wanted to go back in terms of like the speed of crypto, for example. The this this We know that Agile allows us to change and respond to feedback, which is great. But a lot of the times, the software developers and people in general, no matter what the job, can be treated as machines.
Mhm.
And how do you see with the speed of the crypto space? How do you see one of the things Agile desires to do is create a sustainable pace so that people can have their lives and work and do good and then go home and spend time with their families and create where people are not working to a deadline and dying trying to do it. How do
Mhm.
you see that in your experience with XDC and the projects that you're creating? Are you guys working, or are the developers working at a sustainable pace? Like, how does that work for your projects in general?
Yep. Yeah. I mean, the projects that I run, it's always important to me that the developers in the project as happy as they were when they started it, because I want to keep building, right? I want to keep building on the network. And I can't do that if my teams aren't enjoying the process. So, uh, it's not uncommon. So as an example, I mentioned that we are actively working on a sprint for this XDC account manager, or sorry, account tracker, which is going to be very analogous to the rich list. You can go and you can query where you are amongst all the holders.
Mhm.
Um, Part of that relies on APIs that are being written external to my development team. So there's
Gotcha.
another team that's spun up a new server with RPC calls, and they're making a custom API that we can call into for other things. And so we're leveraging that API set for this account tracker. Um, the one of the API calls that we need just isn't written yet, and part of this sprint, we were expecting that by sprint 3 that API call would exist. Now it doesn't exist, so we can't, all that we can do is react to that as best as possible. And so we just had to downscope what we can deliver at the end of this sprint. And that means maybe we can focus on something else, bring something else from the product backlog in. We have more time than we expected in the sprint. And so maybe we can make the UI for the portion that we can deliver a little bit nicer and more polished.
Mhm.
But we just react to this change just like you would anywhere else. So there can't be a death march, whether it's developing a website or whether it's developing software, whatever process that we apply this to. No death marches is one of the first rules.
Yeah. Gotcha. No,
Yeah.
I'm sure that they appreciate that. So it's good to
Yeah.
hear that, especially in the crypto space, that the developers, at least on your projects, are taken care of, and that's that you're looking out for them in that way. So it's
Mhm.
awesome. I'm
Yep.
not sure about other projects, and if your project is having issues, maybe you might reach out to John or
Yeah.
myself, and we'll figure out ways to talk about how you're working and how best to help. But
Mhm.
sorry, I don't want to throw you out there, John, but you seem like you got some great knowledge on you. I'm sure that people
Oh,
could benefit
definitely.
from. So
Yeah, man. I mean, interoperability is huge in crypto between chains, between people. So I would be more than happy if anyone had questions to try to help.
gotcha. Well, I appreciate that. Um, so is there anything else? I'd love to talk about XDC. I would love to talk to you about maybe block oversight here in a bit, but is there anything else you want to talk about that maybe uh agile that I haven't covered in terms of, agile or scrum has helped your teams, or a specific benefit that you see specifically in crypto that maybe we haven't covered?
Well, I mean, one thing I will say, just for maybe a slightly different context, is I think that a fundamental issue within software without software is communication between people. It's always a sticking point. So any process or anything you can do to make it easier for people to communicate and communicate more often, you're going to be more successful. It doesn't matter if you're talking about writing software or not.
Gotcha. I had this up. I was like, you segued right into it. So I was like, okay,
yeah,
I'll just show
perfect.
it.
Right. And so that's the main benefit that I've seen. And when I've seen Scrum fail, it's because that communication failed, right? It's because the team allowed themselves to overpromise and underdeliver, because we're all people and we all take pride in what we do. And when someone says we're going to fail unless X, it's hard not to say, well, then I'm going to roll up my sleeves and I'm going to give you X, right?
Mm-hmm.
But as soon as you find yourself getting into that mindset, it's super hard not to fail. The best thing that you can ever do is be open and honest with how you talk to your customers or your stakeholders. Make sure that expectations are always realistic. And as soon as they become unrealistic, it's a slippery slope, man. I don't care who you are. At some point, you can't just roll up your sleeves and get it done. And the sooner you realize that, and the sooner you're able to say, look, I'm not going to be able to hit this target because of X, Y, Z, whatever it is. And say, but, maybe we do this to change expectations. And I like to always give a solution when I raise a problem, right?
Yeah,
Otherwise,
exactly.
people hate you. But you
It's a
have
good,
to,
it's a good,
is that
good thing.
honesty? No
Yeah.
matter what it is, it's that open and honest communication, whether it's software development or whether it's building a website, whether it's just talking to potential partners. It doesn't matter what you're doing. You have to be open and honest, and it's really difficult. And I'm not saying that people choose not to be honest. I think it's human nature to feel like I'm super good at what I do and I have a rough idea how to do this and I know it has to be done. So I'm going to make it happen. And it's just, you can't connect the dots that way all the time.
Yep. And so one of the, I guess you could say, the pillars of Scrum is that transparency, inspection, and adaptation. So if you don't have the transparency, if you're not clear on both sides of that communication, you don't have the ability to inspect what you're doing and adapt to what you're trying to bring. And so I think you're right. The graph, if you're trying to figure out how this conversation applies to this graph, with each person, communication gets more complicated. Those temptations might to not be clear might get lost as your team size grows, and I think that's why we're hearing small development teams and so forth. But I think that temptation in just each human being is really, you have to have courage to be able to do those, to bring that transparency and to be honest. And because you might lose a contract, right? You might have to pivot, and it's kind of hard to do the more projects build and grow and change. So but of course, the sooner you do that, the sooner you're transparent, the sooner you can get back on track and pivot things. So uh, but yeah, appreciate you bringing that up. I'll just go back to the manifesto here. Well, tell us a little bit more about, for those of the XRP community who may not be as familiar with XDC. I got into XDC and I hold a little bit of it because I know that it's part of the people that believe in the ISO 2002 standard. It's thrown around a lot and it's mentioned alongside XRP in many different contexts. And so I haven't done as much research on it. I've been kind of making other videos, guys. So I haven't been able to do as much research recently into it. And of course, I'm very into the XRP community. What can you tell us a little bit more about XDC itself and
Yeah,
where it stands and where you see it going?
yeah, definitely. So for people, I'll assume people aren't familiar with XDC. So XDC is a fork of Go Ethereum and Quorum from JP Morgan. And XDC network has both public and private state. So the public state is from the fork of Go Ethereum. The private state is from Quorum. We like to say that it's an enterprise-ready layer one blockchain because enterprises can host a masternode and they can have that private network, and they can interact with their users on the private network. And then through the node, they can leak transactions and data onto the public side as they want. So it adds a bit of privacy on top of blockchain, which is a very appealing to financial institutions, right? A bank's going to want to have their own private space to do what they do. But then if they want to interact with other banks, they can go across our public network. So we have that public state, we have that private state. We are a proof of stake network. So we forked from Ethereum, but we're not proof of work. That allows us to be much faster and much cheaper. So 2 seconds settlement time with finality. Our transaction fees are literally like 0.0004 cents. It's extremely cheap, almost free. Energy efficiency is ridiculous because we are proof of stake. You can power the network for about 7,400 kilowatt hours a year, which is about what it takes to run your house. And so like you compare that against big proof of work networks where you're looking at like the power for the country of Colombia, right? That's what they throw around for Bitcoin. So it's literally 1 million times more efficient than a lot of these big proof of work projects. I think a lot of the value, as much value, comes from the people as the technology, right? So that's kind of the big picture for the technology. On the XDC network, I will also mention we're EVM compatible, meaning that any layer 2 on Ethereum could migrate to our network without having to really do much technically, which is nice. And so part of what the foundation does is we talk with layer 2s on Ethereum and see if migrating them over to our chain makes sense for them or not. But typically it means much faster transaction times for their customers and much lower transaction fees, which are the 2 issues with Ethereum. So that's cool, native smart contracts, all that stuff. The people side is important. So the actual network of people is where we get the trade finance use case for the XDC network. So we are working with, so our 2 founders, Atul and Ritesh, they have collaborated with Andre Casterman, who's big in international trade finance. We're part of the TFD initiative. And so we're actually starting to be part of a solution that's being adopted by banks that partake in global trade finance. And so I mentioned the Trade Tech application previously. Trade Tech is in the TFD initiative. They're a non-bank originator for trade finance. And what they're doing is they're taking things like bills of lading and letters of credit, and they're tokenizing them as NFTs, so like security tokens on the XDC network, and allowing qualified investors to come and actually own that NFT almost like a bond, right? So the idea would be Trade Tech can free up the capital behind those letters of credits and bills of lading by tokenizing them and letting accredited investors buy them at a discount, where after some amount of time elapses, Trade Tech buys them back at full price. And so the investors are in that built-in yield. They get to own a very stable asset as part of their portfolio. And the bank gets access to that liquidity they wouldn't have had access to otherwise. Because a lot of times these trade finance applications, they can take a year for an exporter to manufacture and ship and the importer to receive and recognize. So a lot of money there, right? I mean, you hear, I don't know what the actual number is, I'm not sure anybody does, but somewhere around $10 trillion is the market for global trade finance.
Gotcha.
One thing that I really kind of drew me towards Xinfin and XDC is that Xinfin's focused on closing the trade finance gap. And what that means is there's literally a handful of banks that originate almost all of the trade finance around the world. That makes it hard for micro, medium, small enterprises to actually go and get funding. What we're trying to do is open up funding to those organizations. And so we're starting by working within the TFD and getting access to, look at the banks that are in that standard chartered HSBC.
Sorry, TFD, just
what was that?
What was the acronym TFD? Sorry.
Oh, Trade Finance Distribution Initiative.
Okay, sorry, just want to make sure that
makes sense. And so we're working with the big players right now, but our goal is to get ourselves into the trade finance process. So we're not trying to replace anything. We're trying to disrupt and make more efficient, something that's been around for a long time, similar to what XRP is trying to do, which kind of an aside, I honestly think that's the sweet spot for blockchain. I don't want
optimization and improvement.
I have a hard time, and I'm going to get a lot of flack for this. I have a hard time seeing cryptocurrency replace fiat currencies. I have an easy time seeing utility crypto assets going and making existing processes more efficient and having a real good use case there.
That's my I'm totally with you there, because for anyone who's worked in maybe the insurance, loan, if you're in the US, loan processing, mortgage, any of these things, like the systems in general, you start to get a perspective of how antiquated the software, the systems that they're running are that back all of these different. I mean, I've worked in green screens, guys, like things you should never see. I think you should never see in this modern day. And the optimization that the crypto and blockchain can bring to this area is just unfathomable. How the change and the speed of all these different things. So I'm also into cryptos. What got me into it is I'm into process improvement, as I think you obviously have a background in, and just how big of a jump. It's like we go from horse and buggy to, I don't know, what seems like, the Enterprise bridge where we're going to warp instead. Just how crazy that change could be for the financial industry. So, and I know that, of course, with the executive order that just got released in the US, that obviously the US is finally taking it more seriously, which is great. Don't know if you want to touch on that as well, but
Yeah, so it's interesting, particularly so the XDC neither the XDC Foundation nor Xinfin are U.S. entities.
okay.
It turns out that Xinfin is a legal entity in Singapore, which is, Singapore is highly favorable for regulation around blockchain. And so there are certain jurisdictions where XDC has already been ruled as a utility token and not a security. And the UK, Singapore are two of them. And so a lot of what we're doing with trade finance is focused in those parts of the world. The US has been a laggard in adopting this tech.
Yep.
We could speculate as to why, and we probably might agree on the speculation.
Yep.
But it seems like they are starting to change their tune, right? That last executive order looks a lot more cooperative than it does combative.
Yeah.
Where it's kind of the first time I've seen the government say, we want to start to work with this technology. And yes, it needs to be regulated, but we can do that with an eye to making it easier to adopt instead of doing it with an eye to try to kill it, which I feel like has kind of been the sentiment up till recently. So I think it's huge. I think it's great to see our government publicly talking about crypto this way. It's a step in the right direction. I think it's going to take a lot of time. So all that we can do is just keep building, right? That's kind of the mantra, is just keep building. And a lot of our actual application of our technology with regard to trade finance is happening outside the US. And hopefully that can change as regulations come into play and the US continues to become more favorable towards it.
Yeah, and definitely shout out to all the people in the Philippines and the UK that are watching. I think most of my viewership is actually a lot of it is coming from those two areas. So thank you guys for staying viewing and staying interested. Really appreciate your guys' viewership and support, and all my subscribers really. But yeah, it seems like a lot of the Philippines and that area are outside the US are dominating. So we, of course, we want to see the US involved more in a positive way. And really, I want to see them lead that charge personally. I hope that they really start to do that here soon.
Yep, 100%. We're seeing a lot of interest from Africa right now. So a lot of application for blockchain that's going to make it easier for the unbanked to participate in financial markets. And so we're like, I feel like almost once or twice a week, I'm on the phone with a group from a different part of Africa with an idea for blockchain that they want to get our thoughts on and see if it makes sense for the XDC network, and can we give them thoughts on how to implement it. So there's a lot of interest out of Africa right now, and I feel like that's a market where we can actually focus on financial inclusion and closing finance gaps between people and companies there. And that's just true for all of crypto in general. It's a good place to try to apply this technology to really help people. So
well, hopefully people will hear that and take that into account whenever they're doing their sprints and their product ownership. But I wanted to ask, do you consider XDC to be I mean, I heard like JP Morgan thrown out there. Like, do you consider it to be like a competitor to what XRP is doing, or do you consider it symbiotic at all? Like, I'm just kind of curious.
I don't think it's a competitor at all, honestly. I know, so correct me if I'm wrong, XRP is really focused on cross-border remittance, right? And
Yeah,
trying to, yeah.
that's my
Uh,
understanding.
you can, I mean, you could do cross-border remittance with anything. You could do global trade finance with any tech, right?
Yeah,
It really comes down to the people involved with the technology. In our case, the people who are driving the vision, they have fantastic professional networks in trade finance, and so that's where
gotcha.
we focus, and that's how we build. The same is true for Ripple and XRP. The people who are making decisions for the vision of the technology are focused in a different area. I don't think we're ever going to be competitors, honestly. Um,
No,
in
I
fact, yeah, I mean, yeah, I don't think it's an issue.
no, okay. I was just curious because I know that there's like sometimes we have these perceptions and the crypto space can be very tribalistic. And so
Mhm.
I just want to make sure that like I asked the question because I wanted to make
Right.
sure that I got your perspective on your side of things and so that people understand that like there all these different protocols and currencies and are going to be used in multiple different ways and it's I feel like it's going to all overlap and come together at some point, but I
Mhm.
think that technology are like you said are these two particular ones are focused in different areas at least for now.
Yeah.
So um yeah,
Yeah, no, what was I had an idea. I
sorry.
had a thought. No, no, I just can't remember what it was. But I agree. Oh, I was going to say one. So you brought up ISO 20022, and I know that there are a handful of cryptocurrencies that are ISO 20022, say compatible. I mean, that's just a messaging standard that anybody could implement. Um, and so we've implemented support for that messaging standard, meaning that if banks wanted to, they could send Swift formatted messages and have them somehow transact on our network. And the same is true for XRP. Um, but just because we both can speak that language doesn't mean that they're going to be used for competitive reasons.
True.
Banks that are participating in global trade finance may want to leverage that because it's easier to move money within the context of global trade finance. And banks that are looking at international remittance may want to use XRP and ISO 20022 because they're already working within that context. So I think it's important to try to look at things from a collaborative instead of a competitive standpoint,
Gotcha.
because interoperability between chains is big. Seeing how different chains are trying to use similar technologies for different use cases is important. And the communities have more to gain by kind of understanding both sides and trying to be cooperative than they do trying to be combative. It doesn't add anything positive to either side, in my opinion.
It's true. I think as I am, people could look at JTXRP and see me as a maximalist for XRP. I believe that I'm excited about the technology that XRP has and brings. And of course, I like, other cryptos on other blockchains. Like I hold Gala, for example. It's on the Ethereum network, even though that like I love what Gala's doing. Could they be doing it on a network that is easier for me to transact on? Sure. But I think they're actually working to create their own blockchain actually. So, but I all these different things. Again, I just want to address the tribalism and I definitely don't get that feel from you, and I wanted to make sure that that was extremely clear as we're talking about these things. And yeah, I'm trying to unite and bring people together and to collaborate. And so yeah, just want to address that elephant. And as we're talking about, XDC as opposed to XRP, which is
Yep.
the primary focus of my channel. Also, I want to talk a little bit about Bloc Oversight and the you may not be familiar. It's an initiative that's starting up. I'm actually the media manager of that side of things. And so where it's basically a bunch of projects getting together. A lot of them are on the XRP ledger. It's the Blockchain Leadership Oversight Council, and we're trying to promote best practices across the blockchain, and so hopefully be another rising tide that raises all ships.
Mhm.
And we're getting together. The Constitution is being signed. I can't necessarily talk about all the people that are because we haven't had the thing signed yet, so I don't want to go into whose projects because some may not still sign or make it or what have you. But is that something that you think the XDC side of things would be interested is joining a group like that, or are you already a part of other groups like that that are trying to spread best practices?
I mean, so I can't speak for the foundation. Obviously, I mean, you know, given the DAO and everything.
Yeah,
But
of course.
personally, yes, personally, I think that that would be something that we would see value in, is
Okay.
making standards for. Uh, so you're talking about standards for development on top of blockchain, or what are you
Yeah,
talking about?
by so projects trying to support good projects, good practices
Yep.
by blockchain creators for blockchain creators, rather than having a government which may mandate things. But this is our getting together, our pursuit as creators in the space. I say us, I'm just helping these creators get the word
Mhm.
out there
Yeah.
and trying to come together to create good standards and go above and beyond what maybe the government standards would hold.
Oh,
So,
totally. Yeah, gotcha. Yes, that's something that we have also discussed internally as a need. So as an example, second layer projects on our network probably have similar problems that yours experience with regard to, say, liquidity on exchanges. And
mhm.
we have been trying to think of ways that we can help. Now it's tricky, right? Decentralization always has to be a component of the conversation here. What can a decentralized organization trying to build on the blockchain actually do to help second layers? Like, should they? But should second layers want to self-organize and try to make a DAO for standardization, that is definitely something that I would encourage. I think it makes a whole lot of sense. If you start talking about a cross chain, I think that's even better.
Yep.
I think it kind of organically starts to get away from that tribalistic mentality, where if you see these chains working together at a fundamental level.
No, I agree. The this while the primary creators of the, at least as far as I'm aware, are, and we've got like John Deaton involved in this as well. I think is going to be pretty awesome. I'm not sure if, like, I think he's going to be involved somehow. So I think that it's going to be really cool. It's going to be a really huge thing, and would love to see maybe bring it to the DAO, see how maybe they can get
Yep.
involved. But just wanted to make sure you and the viewers were aware that if you're a project and you're trying to use Agile, you're trying to create best practices, why not take it to that extra level and be a part of a community that's going to be helping each other raise the tide for everyone as best we can and set some good standards. So.
Yeah, it's very interesting. So we are just about to, the foundation's about to release a product, which is kind of a governance platform where you can go and create proposals on chain and vote on them. Of course, it's something, everything that we make, we release as open source, and we operate it without any type of fee for the user. And so
Yep.
if if you are interested in a governance platform that would allow these different members to cast votes, we've got that. It'll be released imminently. I don't know if XRPL has that built in some capacity or not already, but I just throwing it out there as an option.
No, I appreciate that. I think a Reaper, if you haven't heard of the Reaper, it's also a really interesting project on the XRPL that actually kills other coins. They have a voting
Oh,
system by their community, and I say kills other
oh,
coins. It like it allows the community to vote, and then the Reaper token inflates their price by 1%, and a portion of that is used to buy tokens off of the market and then burn them. And so it's a really interesting use case. Encourage anyone that's listening to go check it out. But they actually have a voting system where you can vote using your Reaper tokens and the amount that you hold to vote on which token gets reaped every so often.
mhm.
So
Interesting.
I'm not sure how it was built out, but I know that that voting system is getting spread across the XRPL community pretty quick.
Nice.
So
I was not familiar with that. I'm gonna look it up.
yeah, Reaper Finance.io or Reaper.io. So yeah, well, I'll put the links for anything you want to send out for about XDC in the description. We're coming up on an hour here. Really appreciate your time. Is there anything else about Agile that or Scrum or product ownership you'd like to say or encourage the community in some way to maybe adopt these practices or yeah, just anything.
Yeah, I mean, so I've been doing software development for almost 25 years in some capacity, and uh, building with change is an integral component to the system. In my opinion, is the only way to be successful. Whether you call it Scrum or you just call it Agile, to
Mhm.
me it doesn't matter as long as everybody involved understands the rules that you put in place and they agree to operate by them. Uh, and those rules are iterative and account for change. I feel like it's worth doing. So don't get too caught up in pure agile, pure scrum, in my
Mhm.
opinion. I'm not saying anything is bad about it. I'm just saying that sometimes good enough is the enemy of perfect.
Yep.
And if you decide not to try scrum because you can't play it perfectly, it's not the right reason. I really think it's worth trying and just modifying it to fit whatever constraints you have to operate within. So it's just it's worth doing. It's a great way to maximize the value you can deliver on short time frames. So everybody always knows where they are, where they stand. Makes a lot of sense.
Gotcha. No, one of the things I love about the agile in Scrum in particular is the focus on continuous improvement, right? So even though you may not be able to implement Scrum by the book, or you're not able to implement certain parts, you can bring ideas and over time and continuously improve how you're doing things. As I know that the crypto space does immensely well, and is kind of forced to, just because of the drive of the market. But yeah, I love continuous improvement. Agile is a way to facilitate that and bring some great value. So I do appreciate, Jon, you coming out and talking. Hopefully this will be the first of many conversations,
Yeah.
and would love to have you back. Maybe if you have a question for Jon, or an idea for a video, just drop it in the comments below, and I'll be happy to maybe set up another time and get those questions answered on a cadence that's sustainable for me and Jon.
Yeah.
And we'll do that. So, but make sure to like, share, subscribe, share this with someone you know who's interested in agility or crypto, or just the conversation we had about XDC in itself. And really hope to bring the crypto space together, and appreciate XDC, and a member like Jon, who's a product owner, reaching out to me. Greatly appreciate that. And hopefully we can all move forward together and grow the space. But again, Jon, I appreciate your time. I'm JTXRP, and this is Jon McBee, and we are out.